Hi, everyone. I'm back for another episode of Let's Talk About It with Alana Kasner. Alana, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Of course, I'm happy to be here.
So, Alana, you're the Senior Vice President at Parity. I'm going to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit more about what Parity does. But just to introduce the episode, this podcast series is sponsored by RootNote. Today, we're having a conversation on athlete value. We're going to start off this series with Alana and Parity specifically talking about how they capture value for athletes, how they communicate it to brands, and just understanding overall how the sports industry is shifting, especially with athletes. So, Alana, do you want to get started just talking more about Parity and your role there?
Yeah, absolutely. So Parity was founded to close the income and opportunity gap in professional sports. There's a huge disconnect between what male athletes and female athletes are earning, and we've seen that across the board. And obviously, inside of sport, that can't necessarily be impacted, but outside of sport, that can be. And as it relates to the value that individuals might provide in all the different ways that they're showing up for brands or themselves or things like that. And so, since inception, I think we've been able to put over $4.5 million into the hands of pro women athletes across a variety of different types of partnership deals and all of that. So I like to say we're kind of a mix between a creative agency, a sports marketing agency, and a talent representation agency without being a traditional agency. So we work with a community of over 1,100 professional women athletes across 85 sports represented. And that number gets really big because of the niche winter and summer Olympic and Paralympic games. Really cool. As we just had Paris and we've got the Milan games coming up in February. And we don't have exclusive relationships with the athletes. We're just there to provide value in any ways that we can. And again, I mean, I think we've all seen what's happening in the women's sports space. So we don't think it's just a moment, right? We think that this is like the trajectory of where it was coming from and where it will be going. And I think how athletes value themselves in the general way that value is thought about in the women's sports space is a very interesting conversation and one I'm basically having daily with
Yeah, I that's amazing. Yeah, I wanted to talk about that. So, kind of the idea behind this episode is like, what drives value in sports? I don't know. Do you have an answer to that?
No. And I think whoever has the right answer will someday be a bajillionaire for and it's the same way like brands can't really solve where attribution comes from, like in the larger like advertising and sponsorship world. I think it's more about like what moves the needle for different brands in the ways in the places that they're looking to solve for. And so like, right, like we're talking to brands and partners constantly and they're either trying to reach new audiences or they want to double down on something that's like a really important like value for them as a company, or there's something product specific that they want to get out there, right? And it's like, how do you work with the right athletes or the right set of people to solve for that? And I think the way that value then is measured is very different across the board. So the true answer to me is it's not the same every time. And I think that's the really cool part about looking at it from the athlete perspective is like, I think as a former athlete myself, and also just like what I talk to the athletes about is like, there's no one size fits all for this. And so there's like a lot of opportunity out there for everybody because everybody has a different unique story that they bring to the table. They've got a different journey to where they're at. They have different social followings. They make different types of content. They want to talk about different things, right? They're from different places. All of those are parts of their value, as well as potentially like their accomplishments or their notoriety or a variety of other things, right? And it's kind of like this unspoken formula that kind of pieces it all together. And again, we've done some research on this because I'm not sure if you've seen, but like Parity, we've done a couple of different research reports.
Yes.
But we did one a couple of months ago. And I think we found that like 1 in 5 women's sports fans have made a purchase because of because of the fact that there was a women's sports sponsorship around either that athlete or that team or that org. And so like, that's value add for the brand, right? Like there is power in reaching those audiences through those athletes. And so again, there's many components to it.
That's actually one of like the main reasons that I really wanted like you and Parity to be involved in this series was because of all the information that you guys put out and all of the data that you guys comb through and honestly making it very digestible and then actually utilizing it for the athletes that you work with. I think that's awesome. And if we can get 15 minutes of that in an episode, like why not try to put that out there? It's really interesting. I feel like right now we're talking really about kind of like the influencing part of athletes. And you kind of hinted at it before that for women athletes, or let's even just say athletes of sports that aren't quite as visible, going into that branding and that influencer side is a way for you to capture that value that you might not get in an NFL type contract, right? Do you mind talking a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, so one thing is right is like these athletes need to be able to afford their lives and their training. And one thing you'll see is like not every athlete makes the same amount of money from their sport once they're
Yeah.
level, right? We've all seen that to be true. Fine. And then there's the whole world of sports sponsorships and what's possible. And I think what's really interesting is there's way more out there, but sometimes connecting those dots is hard. And right, an athlete on their own in a niche sport with like not a huge profile might start reaching out to brands on her own. She's not really going to get a lot of responses potentially, right? Because the brand's like, oh, that's like a small account, blah, 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 whatever. I've never heard of that sport. I mean, that's rare, but you know what I'm saying. Meanwhile, this person could be like a 5-time Olympian or Paralympian in something and they don't even know. But I think that what's really cool about it is, and this is not a knock on the men's side at all, but like the women are so much more eager and excited to do the work with the brands, and like the quality of output is like so tremendous that that's already a stepping stone to like um elevate what's possible, right? Like above a more traditional partnership. The other thing is like people follow pro women athletes because they care, right? I mean, yeah, there's a handful of people that are just cool to follow, right? And so they're on your timelines and your feeds and you just want to know what's going on, but they're genuinely interested, right? They care, they're interested, they're paying attention to what they're talking about. So whether you've got 3,000 followers or 3 million followers, those people are locked in, right? On what you're doing. And one of the other stats that we pulled was, I believe it was 68% of sports fans trust women athletes in terms of like what they're promoting and what they're talking about. A huge number, right? That's a really, really, really big number. So 68% of whatever amount of followers you have, like that's still a huge win for a brand. And so it's not always about the bigger profiles necessarily, because you could work with someone with 20,000 followers. And if you can convince, let's say 60 to 70% of them are bought in, that's a good size of a new X, Y, and Z being purchased, or new followers for that brand or whatever. So I just think that, there's a lot of magic in what these women bring to the table. And it's not all the like, oh, this was a tough journey and feel bad for us because we're hustling and all of that. It's more like we're badass and we can do 8 million things at once. And women are running. Yeah. Women are carrying the weight of everything anyway. So like add this to the list type of stuff, you know? And so they're just so much more multidimensional, and it's just like much more interesting and engaging, which I think again adds into, once the brands know this, the excitement about it.
We're talking about women athletes specifically, that's Parity's thing, right? But for everyone listening to this, what we're talking about is the other part of the sports industry in some ways. Like, okay, we see the MLB, we see the NBA, we see all these male athletes. Now we have women's sports that honestly run in a different way at the current moment. The way that they market to the fans, the way people experience them is different. And it's going to be like that for those of you, even if you are a men's sport, but you play a sport that's not as popular. There's still people that are bought into you. You're able to make content that's more interesting. Like, one of the things I always think is so funny is, I hate to shade people, but these like football athletes that'll do these like huge NIL deals in the commercial, and they're like haven't smiled, and it's like they're muffled and they're like talking all low, and you're like, who wants to watch that? Like, you're paying $1 million for this commercial when you could pay me like, $100, $200 for a quick Instagram reel. It's crazy.
I think the old model will never go away because I think just too much systematic stuff already built in a particular way. But that's the case with like, same thing with like, why does a brand want to spend, I'm making this number up, $10 million a year to put their name on a football stadium for an NFL partnership where they don't know what they're getting back for it, where they could take that $10 million a year and invest in across women's sports in a really interesting way and see actual return on that, right? It could be some athletes, it could be a team, it could be, and so I don't think like those irrational spends will go away. I'm just excited to see more and more opportunities provided to women where they can get to tell their stories or show what they're capable of or make engaging content, right? And it potentially move the needle more. And then the brands are always like, oh, yeah, okay, right. And then that leads to more work and stuff like that. So
I know this is a little off the cuff. By any chance, do you have any stats or general numbers about the ROI on investing in women's sports or other sports?
There's no like one versus the other.
Okay.
And what's more lucrative. I think if you look at some of the numbers related to like the most recent WNBA team's valuation, NWSL team's valuation, I think what's really interesting to look at is like the speed by which they got there, right? And so for a pro men's team to like X times over their valuation, that might have taken 50 years, but on the women's side, it's like 7-8 years, right? To get that to that place that many times over. And so like that's one way of looking at it. I think the viewership numbers are really interesting.
Yeah.
And I think you just see, again, it's like the multipliers and how quickly those multipliers are happening. That for me is like a place I always tune into, but there's not like a particular number across the board that would be like standardized in terms of what's happening. I also think one of the things that's cool, and again for y'all in the collegiate space, like when you see some of these like women's softball, like the softball World Series, right? Like the numbers for that were astronomical.
Insane.
It was outperforming pro men's sports in the same time slot, like comparatively, right? Like those are signs of like, this is the place that people need to be paying attention to.
We're going to break down more like analytics and finances in later episodes of this series. But I love what you're saying right now. Look at the analytics, like look at the numbers of the viewership, look at how quickly it's growing compared to others. And you see how fast that's going and you see how it's growing and people are interested in it. And then you invest more in that. When you're doing your conversations in Parity and you're trying to find, new clients or new people to support athletes, what are the kinds of things you guys are talking about to really get them to see that value and to buy in, right? Because like you're saying, like the ROI is different for every brand. How do you get them to even take the chance?
For the brands that are toying with the whole like, well, we've only ever really worked on the men's side of things, or we've only done this, and like here, then it's like, okay, like what are your brand goals? What are you trying to solve for the next 24 months? And then we kind of come up with the set of things that make the most sense for them to invest in as it relates to whatever those things are, right? And a lot of times on the women's side, it does make more sense to work with individual athletes. I'm not saying don't invest it on a league team or like, please do. It just keeps moving everything forward. But there's a lot of opportunity for athletes to get involved as more and more brands start to see that like there's a lot of there for them.
Hearing you say that pairs so well with the conversations I've been having with college athletes and local brands, like in the different college towns with NIL. I feel like just all these business seminars and people on LinkedIn and all of this are telling businesses and local companies, do NIL, work with student athletes. And they're like, I don't know what to do. Do I just give them a free acai bowl for an Instagram post? Like people are like, we're losing money, all these things. I feel like what you guys are doing like on a small scale is something that definitely the college athletes listening can get into. Like even if you don't have an agent or an NIL group at your school, just like helping the brands that you love, just going to them and being like, hey, this is what NIL is. This is what we could do. Do you guys need more people coming into the store? Do you need people buying a specific product? Like that is something you can do. And again, we'll break it down, but the analytics that we're going to talk about and the rest, like you could truly do that and get it done.
And the one thing I'll say back to value on that point really quickly is like sometimes it takes more than one post, right? And I think that, sometimes it takes an athlete showing up every Wednesday for 3 or 4 weeks to be like, yo, I'm at this restaurant right off campus. Come meet me here. I'm here for the next 2 hours. Let's hang, right? Get this whatever and keep it moving, right? But yeah, like sometimes you have to invest a little bit more on the athlete side to help the brand see the reward, which then in turn would hopefully result in whether it's more money or more opportunity or whatever. So,
and it's really normal too. Like you were just saying, like it takes a couple times. Like I could think of my thing is SoulCycle. Like I love SoulCycle, and like I'm an ambassador now, so like don't think I'm like doing it. But I was going for years, and I had a friend like last week that was like, I actually almost went to a SoulCycle class because you've been saying it for years that you love to go. Like it's compounding interest. Like we learned in my marketing program, like it takes almost 7 times for someone to see an ad before they buy.
And that's what I was going to say. And so it's like 5 to 7 times before they like move, like go to make a purchase. And sometimes that has to be 5 to 7 different ways. So like, it's not only just the, like, they probably were talking to you about SoulCycle. It showed up on their Instagram. They drove by it 100 times and they finally were like, oh, I should go to SoulCycle. Right.
Yeah.
He said, so you have to like think about the psyche of how the consumer is like thinking about it. Right. And so even back to like, the women's sports fans are being really engaged, right? Like the more these women are repping stuff or talking about stuff, or any athlete for that matter, it's another notch of a brand of a consumer hearing about a thing and getting closer to like moving the needle on something.
Yeah, I want to connect this because you talked about leagues now. Do you have any thoughts on how building your personal brand can connect to like organizational success and all of that?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, I think you see it's happening more and more. I mean, look what Stud Buds just did, right?
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, that's the perfect example, right? Where they were like, hey, we're going to just be us and we're going to do this thing we like to do for fun and we're going to show up, and they were making money. They got sponsors for it, like all of that. And all it's doing is helping elevate the league and the Minnesota Lynx and the WNBA as an entirety, right? It goes back to the whole, like, I just want to be an athlete. I don't want to be all of this. You kind of don't have a choice at a certain point. So like your brand is there, whether you choose to lean into it and build it or not. So it's just more exposure, right? It's more opportunity, it's more exposure. And especially like outside of the main like sports, anything that's like a little more off the cuff, or you are playing internationally or things of that nature. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I want to, kind of connect all of these different things that we've talked about so far. How do athletes who maybe don't have a lot of representation yet, right? Or they're getting ready to go pro or they're just in college, how do they take all of this and like get started? Like how do we actually act on this stuff?
Yeah. I should say at the pro level, like reach out to me if you're a pro
Yeah.
athlete. But kind of what you said, like find some local businesses, like geographically and regionally is the easiest way to get started in my opinion.
Uh-huh.
Like, don't go looking for these national partnerships and sponsorships. That's a lot harder to lock in
Yeah.
my opinion. Unless you're like household name, and or have the time to put in the work to procure one of those, right? Because it's not impossible. And then like see how it goes and get comfortable making content and being online and talking to people and showing up in places, and then kind of figure out like who you want to be in that space, right? Because I think brand building for people can look really different, and it's like they want to lean all the way into who they are now. That might not be who they want to be in 10 years, right? And so it sort of depends like which persona of yourself you feel like really is the best reflection of who you might be in the long run. Because I think like being really true to yourself, authentic and organic is probably also your best bet as you start to lean in with brands and yourself and content, just because that's what's going to be the most believable out there anyway. And so that's what the consumers and the fans are really going to align with.
I love that. I just came up with this in my head, so I don't know if this is gonna flow, but like intentional experimentation.
Yeah.
I don't know, like where it's like, okay, I want to just try this out and see if I'm gonna do it. You're not just throwing out NIL deals and posting things willy-nilly, but you're like, hey, I'm purposely trying out and seeing what I like, what does well, what adds value to all the different things I'm trying to do, and we're just gonna keep going with that.
And it's like, yes, 100%. I really like that. And it's like impossible to like grow an Instagram following these days. Like you can do it, but it's not the same that it used to be, right?
Yeah.
It's obviously more people are leaning into TikTok and the virality component, right? And like maybe a little bit back to YouTube because the earnings can be better depending on how many stuff you get. But that's why I feel like the experimentation piece is like really key, because you don't know what the thing is that's going to hit for you. And like, you got to try a little bit of everything to see what really takes off.
Alana, thank you so much for coming on this episode of Let's Talk About It. Everything you said really hits like all of the goals that we're trying to get for the rest of the series. And everything that you're doing at Parody is so awesome. So I'm just going to encourage everyone to check out their website. I'll have all of the information linked here and then also on our resource page on Let's Talk About It. Any final words for the audience?
Oh, just keep on keeping on is all I'll say, because it's tough out there, but there really is opportunity out there for most people in this space. You just got to find your niche. So
awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Sydney.
Hey guys, it's Sid. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Let's Talk About It, brought to you by RootNote, the all-in-one platform creators rely on to track growth, pitch brands, and turn content into revenue. With support for dozens of platforms like TikTok and Instagram to Shopify and Patreon, you can get unified analytics, real-time dashboards, and beautiful drag and drop data spaces. For more information, go to rootnote.co, that is ROOTNOTE.co, and I'll see you guys next week.